Mace Windu's starfighter streaked through the void, its system struggling to maintain stability as a blaring distress signal drew him toward an uncharted region of the galaxy. The signal, faint but insistent, originated from a desolate planet whose atmosphere shimmered with interference. Despite its dangers, Mace couldn't ignore a potential call for help. Guided by the Jedi Code, he piloted his craft through a turbulent descent, his ship rocking as it was dragged through the planet's heavy atmosphere. Just as he crossed into the lower stratosphere, an energy surge overwhelmed his systems. The starfighter spiraled out of control, crashing into the jagged terrain with a deafening impact. Staggering from the wreckage, Mace assessed his surroundings. The landscape stretched out barren and hostile, with blackened spires of rock piercing an overcast sky. The air was breathable but heavy with moisture, a stark reminder of how alien this place was. With his lightsaber clipped securely to his belt, he turned toward the source of the signal, a faint beacon pulsing on his handheld tracker. His sense of duty outweighed his own predicament. Someone or something out here required his help. Hours of trekking through rugged terrain brought Mace to a cave entrance carved into the side of a massive cliff. The beacon's signal intensified, emanating from deep within. With his senses heightened and lightsaber ready, he ventured inside. The air grew colder, and an unnatural hum reverberated off the cavern walls. At the heart of the cave, Mace discovered a chamber lit by dim, flickering machinery. In its center stood a stasis pod, ancient yet remarkably intact. Layers of frost coated its surface, obscuring the figure within. Mace wiped the frost away, revealing the face of a man frozen in time. His features were sharp, his presence unmistakable, even in hibernation. Mace recognized the armor as something from a bygone era, a fusion of Jedi and Sith influences. Though the force was subdued in the chamber, he could feel an immense, slumbering power emanating from the pod. A name surfaced in Mace's mind: Revan, the fabled Jedi Knight who had fallen to darkness only to find redemption. Curiosity warred with caution, but the immediate concern was survival. The planet was harsh and unforgiving, and Mace knew he couldn't leave without unraveling the mystery of the pod. After hours of studying the archaic controls, he managed to deactivate the stasis field. With a sharp hiss, the pod released its ancient occupant. Revan's eyes opened slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to guarded awareness as he stepped forward, his body weak from centuries of slumber. Revan spoke first, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Who are you? Where am I?" Mace introduced himself, summarizing the events that had led him there. Revan listened intently, piecing together fragments of memory. He explained how he had chosen to enter stasis, a desperate act to preserve himself during a time of great turmoil. Now, centuries removed from his own era, he found himself in a galaxy utterly changed, stranded alongside a Jedi Master he had only read about in distant echoes of the Force. The days that followed tested both men in ways they had not anticipated. The planet was hostile, its ecosystem a relentless challenge. Resources were scarce, and the terrain was treacherous. Revan, though still regaining his strength, proved an invaluable ally, his knowledge of survival strategies and ancient technology complementing Mace's decisive leadership and combat prowess. Together, they constructed a rudimentary shelter near the cave and devised plans to repair Mace's damaged starfighter. Their collaboration was not without tension. Revan's views on the Force, shaped by his turbulent journey through light and darkness, clashed with Mace's steadfast adherence to the Jedi Code. Revan questioned the rigidity of the Jedi, citing his own fall and redemption as proof of the necessity of embracing all aspects of the Force. Mace, though deeply skeptical, couldn't entirely dismiss Revan's arguments. The philosophical debates often arose as they worked side by side, their words sharp yet laced with a growing mutual respect. One particularly harrowing event occurred during a supply run. The two had ventured deeper into the wilderness to scavenge materials, only to encounter a predatory creature unlike anything they had faced before. Towering and armored, it moved with terrifying speed, its roar shaking the ground. Mace and Revan fought side by side, their combat styles a study in contrast. Mace's precision and discipline balanced Revan's adaptability and improvisation. Together they struck down the beast, their combined efforts cementing a bond forged in battle. As the month wore on, their initial wariness gave way to camaraderie. Mace began to see Revan not just as a relic of the past, but as a man who had endured immense hardship and emerged stronger for it. Revan, in turn, gained a renewed appreciation for the Jedi Order through Mace's unyielding commitment to its ideals. Though their paths had been vastly different, they found common ground in their shared struggles and their unwavering determination to protect those who could not protect themselves. Their breakthrough came on the 27th day. Using parts scavenged from the planet's ruins and Mace's ship, they managed to jury-rig a functioning distress transmitter. As they activated it, hope flickered on the horizon. A Republic ship patrolling a nearby sector intercepted the signal and prepared to extract them. The knowledge that rescue was imminent brought a sense of relief, but also an undercurrent of bittersweet realization. Their time together on this forsaken planet had been transformative, a rare convergence of two extraordinary lives. When the Republic ship finally arrived, Mace and Revan stood side by side, watching as the shuttle descended to whisk them away. Their journey together had been brief but profound, a reminder that even the most unlikely of alliances could yield understanding and growth. As they departed the planet, both men carried with them not only the lessons learned from each other but also a deepened resolve to confront the challenges that awaited them in a galaxy still grappling with the balance between light and darkness. As the Seventh Fleet descended upon the desolate planet, its flagship, the Resolute, cast a long shadow over the rugged terrain. Captain Wilhuff Tarkin stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes narrowing as he surveyed the desolate world below. The distress signal had been deciphered as originating from Jedi Master Mace Windu, though the circumstances surrounding it were unclear. For Tarkin, the Jedi were often a source of frustration, mystics operating outside the clear lines of military structure. Still, he respected their effectiveness and understood the importance of retrieving a figure as prominent as Windu. When Mace and Revan boarded the shuttle for extraction, Tarkin was already wary. His unease intensified the moment Revan stepped onto the deck of the Resolute. Even without being sensitive to the Force, Tarkin could feel something about the man. Revan's very presence seemed to alter the air around him, a weight that pressed down subtly but unmistakably. The combination of his archaic armor, his piercing gaze, and the aura of authority he exuded unsettled the otherwise composed captain. The journey to Coruscant began without delay, the fleet cutting through hyperspace toward the Republic's gleaming heart. In the confines of the starship, Revan quickly became a topic of whispered speculation among the crew. Soldiers and officers alike found reasons to keep their distance, their instincts warning them that this man was something far beyond their understanding. Tarkin, too, found himself keeping a close eye on the newcomer, his sharp mind analyzing every interaction. Initially, Tarkin kept his concerns to himself, observing quietly. He found Mace Windu in the officers' lounge on the second day of their journey, standing near a viewport that revealed the swirling blue of hyperspace. Mace acknowledged him with a brief nod. Master Windu, Tarkin began, his tone measured but probing. I must admit, your companion has sparked curiosity among my crew and myself. Mace turned, his expression unreadable. Revan is a Jedi of great significance. His knowledge predates much of what we consider the modern Republic. I can assure you, Captain, that he poses no threat. Tarkin arched an eyebrow, folding his hands behind his back. I'm not so sure your assurances will ease the minds of those aboard this ship. Whatever Revan is, his mere presence creates a disturbance. And I don't mean the Force. Soldiers feel it. Officers feel it. It's as if the man carries the weight of 1,000 battles. Mace allowed a moment of silence before replying. Revan has lived a life unlike any other. The choices he's made, the battles he's fought, and the redemption he's earned, they're not something you can ignore. He commands attention because his very existence is proof of the Force's complexity. That complexity, Tarkin countered, his voice tightening, is precisely what concerns me. A man like that could undermine the discipline of even the most hardened troops. His power, his history. You cannot deny that it makes him dangerous. Dangerous, Mace asked, his tone taking on an edge. Revan is not a threat to this ship or to you, Captain. He has chosen the path of the light, despite the darkness he's faced. Tarkin frowned, choosing his next words carefully. And yet you are a Jedi. You should understand better than anyone that such power, untempered by structure or accountability, is as much a liability as it is an asset. The conversation ended with Mace walking away, his patience worn thin by Tarkin's unyielding skepticism. Yet Tarkin's unease did not fade. Over the next several days, he made it his business to monitor Revan closely, observing him during training exercises and casual interactions. What he saw only deepened his concerns. Revan's presence among the crew had a polarizing effect. Some were inspired by his wisdom and strength, while others grew increasingly wary of his overwhelming aura. One such instance occurred during a training session in the ship's sparring bay. Revan, at Mace's suggestion, had taken to practicing with a group of Republic troopers, demonstrating techniques that combined lightsaber combat with unarmed defense. His movements were fluid and precise, his strikes landing with such precision that even the most skilled soldiers struggled to match him. It wasn't just his physicality, it was the way he seemed to predict his opponent's actions before they made them, as if he were not merely fighting them but orchestrating their responses. Tarkin watched from a distance, his jaw tightening, as he observed the effect Revan had on those around him. There was admiration, yes, but also something darker: fear, and perhaps even awe. To Tarkin, this was dangerous. No single being should command that level of reverence, not even a Jedi. Later that evening, Tarkin sought out Revan directly. He found him in one of the observation decks, gazing out at the stars. The former Sith Lord turned at Tarkin's approach, his expression calm but knowing. "Captain Tarkin," Revan said, his tone polite but firm. "You've been watching me." Tarkin did not bother denying it. "Your presence here is disruptive, to say the least. I wanted to understand why." Revan studied him for a moment before replying. "You fear what you don't understand. That's natural. But let me assure you, Captain, my only intention is to aid Master Windu and return to the Republic. I have no interest in your fleet or its politics." "Perhaps not," Tarkin said, his voice sharp, "but power like yours is inherently political. Whether you like it or not, people are drawn to strength, and they will follow you if they believe in it. That makes you a threat to order." Revan's expression remained unreadable. "Order, Captain, is often a fragile construct. I've seen empires rise and fall, each convinced of its own permanence. You fear me because you believe I could destabilize your precious Republic. But the truth is, the Republic has always been its own greatest threat." Tarkin bristled but chose not to argue. He understood that Revan's mind operated on a scale far beyond his own, shaped by centuries of conflict and reflection. Yet that only solidified his distrust. A man with such power and perspective could not be controlled, and Tarkin valued control above all else. As the Resolute drew closer to Coruscant, the tension aboard the ship reached its peak. Tarkin confined himself to his quarters, drafting a report that would include his observations about Revan. While he had no authority to detain the man, he intended to ensure the Jedi Council was made fully aware of the implications of allowing someone like Revan to roam freely. When they finally arrived at Coruscant, Revan and Mace prepared to disembark. Tarkin watched from the bridge, his expression unreadable as the two Jedi descended the ramp. As Revan turned to glance back at the ship, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, Tarkin felt the weight of Revan's gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the conflict that had brewed between them. Tarkin couldn't shake the unease that lingered even after the Jedi had gone. For all his doubts about the Jedi Order, he found himself hoping that they could contain whatever Revan represented. Because if they couldn't, Tarkin feared that the galaxy might once again tremble under the weight of a force too powerful to be controlled. When Revan stepped into the circular chamber of the Jedi High Council on Coruscant, the weight of his presence was palpable. The room, perched high above the bustling cityscape, radiated calm through its wide windows and serene design. But the air inside was thick with tension. The council members sat in their customary arrangement, their expressions ranging from measured neutrality to open concern. Grand Master Yoda occupied his central seat, his wise eyes narrowed as he regarded Revan. To his right sat Mace Windu, his demeanor steady yet guarded, and alongside him were other notable members of the council, including Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shak Ti, and Plo Koon. Revan stood in the center of the room, his bearing calm but commanding. Clad in plain robes now provided by the Order, he looked every bit the Jedi, yet the lingering echoes of his ancient past and the unfathomable weight of his deeds radiated from him. The council began with silence, each member reaching out through the Force, gauging the man before them. What they found was not darkness, but a profound depth of experienced light and shadow intertwined in ways they struggled to comprehend. Master Windu was the first to speak, his voice steady and deliberate. Revan, you stand before the Jedi High Council as a figure out of time. Your history with the Force, both its light and dark aspects, raises questions that cannot be ignored. We must understand who you are now and what role, if any, you might play in the Republic's future. Revan inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. I expected nothing less. Ask your questions, masters. I will answer as honestly as I can. It was Ki-Adi Mundi who spoke next, his voice tinged with skepticism. Your name is Legend Jedi Knight, Sith Lord and Redeemer. You've been the champion of the light and the herald of the dark. Tell us, how do you reconcile such extremes? Where does your allegiance lie now? Revan took a moment before responding, his gaze steady. My path has been unconventional, to say the least. I was raised as a Jedi, trained in the ways of the light. Yet the wars of my time, the Mandalorian Wars, and the conflict with the Sith demanded choices that the Jedi Order was unprepared to make. I fell to the dark side not out of malice, but out of necessity, believing that strength was the only path to victory. That belief consumed me. His voice softened slightly, but I was redeemed. My friends in the Force brought me back. Since then, I have sought to act not as a champion of light or darkness, but as a servant of balance. The Force is not bound by the narrow definitions we impose upon it. The room fell silent, the Council absorbing his words. Yoda finally spoke, his tone contemplative. Balance you seek. Dangerous this pursuit can be. Conflict, balance often brings HM. Yes, Revan admitted, but it also brings growth. The galaxy has suffered under the rigid binaries of Jedi and Sith for too long. It is the extremes that lead to destruction, not the balance. Master Shak Ti leaned forward, her elegant presence commanding attention. And what of the lives you've touched or ended in pursuit of this balance? Your actions as both a Sith Lord and a Jedi Knight altered the galaxy irreparably. Do you accept responsibility for the chaos you wrought? I do, Revan said, his voice firm. I carry the weight of those choices every day. I know I can never undo the harm I caused, but I can ensure it serves as a lesson for myself and for others. That is why I am here now, standing before you, willing to face judgment. Mace's voice cut in, sharp yet calm. And what do you see as your role in this era? The Republic is not the one you knew, and the Jedi Order has evolved since your time. What do you offer that this council should not view as a potential threat? Revan straightened, his eyes sweeping across the faces of the gathered masters. My role is not for me to decide. I am a relic of the past, awakened in a time not my own. If the council deems it best that I fade into obscurity, I will accept that. But if I can offer guidance, if my knowledge of the ancient Sith Empire and my understanding of the Force can serve the Republic, then I am willing to do so. My only aim is to ensure that the mistakes of my era are not repeated. Peel Koon spoke, his deep, filtered voice carrying a note of cautious respect. Your humility is noted, Revan, but your potential remains a concern. Even now, your connection to the Force is unlike anything we have encountered in recent memory. You walk a path that many might see as heretical. How do we trust that you will not fall again? I have already fallen, Revan replied. And I have climbed back. That experience has given me a clarity I did not possess before. I understand the temptation of power, the allure of control. I will not deny that such temptations still exist, but I have learned to recognize them for what they are. I seek no throne, no conquest, no authority. If you doubt me, then watch me. Test me. I have nothing to hide. The council exchanged glances, their deliberations extending beyond words as they communicated through the Force. Revan waited, his patience a testament to the trials he had endured over lifetimes. Finally, Yoda spoke again, his words slow and deliberate. Much fear your presence stirs, yet much hope as well. A teacher you might be, or a destroyer. In time, this we will see. For now, closely we shall watch. Mace added, until then, you will remain under the supervision of the Jedi Order. You will have access to our archives, and your insights will be considered, but you will not act without the Council's approval. Do you accept this? Revan nodded solemnly. I do. I only ask for the chance to prove my intentions." As the meeting concluded, the council members dispersed, their thoughts as varied as their expressions. Some, like Yoda, saw the potential for Revan to be a force for good, a guide in an era increasingly fraught with uncertainty. Others, like Ki-Adi-Mundi, remained deeply skeptical, viewing him as a volatile element that could destabilize the order. For Mace, the decision weighed heavily. While he respected Revan's convictions, the sheer power and influence the man carried made him a variable unlike any other. Revan himself left the chamber with a sense of uneasy relief. His fate was no longer solely his own, but in the hands of an order that, for all its wisdom, still struggled to understand him. As he stepped into the hallways of the Jedi Temple, he could feel the Force swirling around him not as a judgment, but as a challenge. His journey was far from over.